back to my studio. This is Emma on this beautiful spring day here in the UK. Hello and welcome to you from wherever you are in the world. It's just so lovely. I keep seeing comments from people and I'm just loving the fact that I'm not just talking to myself here in the studio. I am talking to people from all over the place, and it's just a fantastic connection with you all. So thank you for being here and thank you for subscribing to my channel. I'm just having such a good time doing this. It makes me feel very happy to have you here, even if it's only virtually. Maybe one day we will meet, who knows? Maybe I'll get to travel the world and meet you in person. So last week, over the last couple of weeks in my videos, I was working on daffodils because it's spring here in the UK, and although it's been very, very cold, the sun is shining so brightly in a big blue sky, and you can't help but be cheered up by that. It's really lovely. So my last video I showed you how I went about making this little sample here with these pretty little daffodils. I've obviously got like yellow on my brain at the moment, and it's very strange because really yellow was a colour I never wanted to work with before. I don't know, a couple of years ago I started actually using a little bit more. Look at this, isn't that a gorgeous colour? I found this piece of yellow silk in my box of fabrics and I thought, oh, that's really lovely. It's so pristine and so shiny, it's just waiting to be used. So it may or may not get used in this week's video. And the other thing I've got here is a lovely box of yarns. Now some of these, I think in my last video I told you these were crochet yarns, which is what I think they are. But you know, anything is usable, anything you've got in. I've even got some, very old-fashioned stuff here, some rick-rack braid. I don't know what you call it where you come from, but I was thinking, well, you know, how could you incorporate that into daffodils? There's so many different things you could be doing, and it's all about using what you've got. If you've got something crazy orangey coloured, use that for your middle of your daffodils, whatever you've got in. I think it's very interesting that my first sample that I did looked like this, and I'd done the trumpets going sideways, and then suddenly it sort of morphed into going little circles in the middle, and that really began to work for me. And the reason that some of that worked for me was because I used my sketchbook, which I would really like to do a little video on, just to talk you through my process in there, because I think it's quite useful sometimes to step away from the fabrics that you're using, step away from your normal way of doing things, and just throw a little bit of something else into the mix, which is when I use paint and paper and a bit of stitch. And it sort of kind of frees me up because I'm not thinking, oh, it's got to be fabric. It can be a mixture of things and anything goes. And the other thing I'm loving, I don't know if you can see, is my little jam jar of yellow and green, which is really filling up now, and that can be used perhaps later on to make something else, you know, using yellow and green, perhaps with my embellishing machine. So I know some of you don't have an embellishing machine, and quite a lot of you I'm sure. So I thought this week I would do the same sort of picture that I did over the last couple of weeks, but I'm just going to be using my sewing machine because I think that's a much more common thing to have. So I've made a base, lovely base. Doesn't that sound nice? I always like it when you get some stitching into it and it sounds really nice. And I'm going to show you how I go about doing that. And then I've got lots of lovely different kinds of daffodils to show you, because yes, I'm still into my daffodils. I'm not rushing, nature isn't rushing past spring, so neither am I, and there's still so many lovely daffodils around our village to see. So I'm going to talk to you about that in this video, and we'll see where it takes us. I may not get onto the yellows today, so I'll give you a little taster there, but I will certainly get onto them probably next week, if not today. So without more ado, as I say, I'm going to show you how I go about creating this background, and we'll see where we get to. Oh, there we go, nice and focused. Okay, so what I've got going on so far is I've got my base underneath here, which is the nice soft curtain interlining, and I've just cut some nice strips of green fabrics, which I'm going to pin on to here. If I turn these around, you can see I'm actually going to be doing them vertically like I did my first piece, and this is going to be free machine embroidered, no embellishing today. So I'm just going to pin these on, and then I'll free machine embroider them with different colours, and I might put some other little finer strips in between these ones. These are quite broad, they're about oh, I don't know, 1.5 inches or something. And I'm just making sure they overlap. Oops. And so I can free machine this and on, and then I can play around with some stitching and perhaps some different shades of green, and I'll put some dark stalks on like I did for my, I'll just show you this. This is what I'm emulating, copying if you like, but this is done with the embellisher, so it's got a very different textured surface. And I thought, well, this week I'll do it without the embellisher, because I know not everybody has an embellishing machine, and so I'm going to just use free machine embroidery, and we'll see what difference that makes. Okay, so I'm going to finish pinning it on and stitch it down, and then I'll show you it again. Okay, so here is my trusty sewing machine ready to go. I've set it up for free machine embroidery. So I've got my darning foot on here, which means the fabric can move around more easily. I've actually lowered my top tension a little bit. I've got my stitch length on 0. I only lower my top tension on my machine because that's what it likes. It seems to work better. But you must do what your machine prefers. And underneath here, I've lowered the feed dog teeth so that there's nothing to catch on the fabric. Now, what I have done before I start, I'll just show you underneath if I can. I've actually added, let's see if I can do this. So that's the wadding, and I realised because I haven't embellished the surface, the wadding that I've got is actually quite flexible and soft, so trying to free machine embroidery into it wouldn't really be very good. So I've put some of my favourite stabiliser down here, which is Stitch and Tear, but obviously you can use whatever stabilisers you've got. That will just mean I've got a stiffer surface and the machine won't be eating my fabric, hopefully. And there we go. So I'm ready for free machine embroidery. You must always make sure you put your presser foot down, and obviously if you turn your machine on, it's even better. So I think we're good to go. I'm starting sort of in the centre of this, and I'm going to work out and just do simple lines of stitching. Take my pins out as I go. I've chosen a thread which is fairly sort of light in colour so that it'll go with most of the fabrics, and then I can add another darker colour in, or I can add darker fabrics. I will be adding dark stalks to it, so I'm not going to go too dark. And it's quite funny, it's always different when I'm not embellishing a surface. It makes for a very different stitching game, really. Makes for a very different practice. Let's just move those out of the way a bit. I think you can see, because I've got the wadding underneath, it actually makes it a little bit quilted, which is a nice surface. I do like it, and it's just a different way of doing things. So I will stitch this all down, and then we'll be able to move on to doing the flower heads. Haha, the exciting bit. So this is the piece that I've been free machine embroidering. You can see it's a little bit rough and ready, and I will do some more stitching into it, but I wanted to talk to you about edges at this point. I've tried to make sure that I've got, I'll just bring it down a bit. I've tried to make sure that I've got enough overlap. If I just turn this over, and you can see I've got an overlap at the top, and I've made sure I've got an overlap at the sides, so that when I turn this over, I can just take these bits that are overlapping and I will pin them down like this. This is a really nice way of doing your edges. And it doesn't matter if it's a little bit bumpy and wobbly. That's part of the joy of doing textiles and free machine embroidery. We're not doing patchwork where it's got to be precise. We're doing something much looser, I would say, which is why I like it, because I was never very good at patchwork. It's not my thing, and I really admire people who do it, I have to say, because there's some fantastic things that people do. So if we look at that, that's now got pins along, and I'll be able to just free machine embroider up and down, so the edge becomes part of the whole thing. And I'll do the same at the side. We'll pull that over like that, and we'll pin that in place, and I'll fiddle about with the corners. They're always a little bit fiddly, but you can usually get them to be roughly how you want them. Sometimes you have to do a bit of a fiddle. And then what I'm going to do after that is I've got some nice strips here which are going to be the stalks for my daffodils. I've made them with a point on so that if I put a daffodil head on top of there and hide that point, that becomes a stalk, but it could be that that becomes a leaf. So by making them pointy, they can be versatile and they can be either. And I can just overlap them. I'm just going to make them quite random because I don't want to make it too stylized and too orderly. And then when I put my daffodil heads on, it'll look really nice, I think. So I've got some more pinning and stitching to do, so I'll get on with that. Okay, so I've kind of stitched, I'll just show you the back there. I've folded all the edges over now and stitched them down. And what I've got here is I've got lots of little strips of the olivey greeny sort of colour, and I'm just busy pinning these in place, and then I'll be able to take them over and stitch them down, and then finally we will get some fun yellow stitching, which I'm really looking forward to. It's funny when you're doing the background and it seems to take forever, because really what you want to be doing, it's always the next bit, isn't it? The next bit you want to be doing, and the next bit means you'll be finishing it and you want to see it all finished, and it's all very exciting because you want it done. But there's so much to be said for just relishing this little bit and relishing each bit that you do and not rushing it, because after all, once you've finished this one, what are you going to do next? That's the question. So I'm just really enjoying doing this, and then I'm going to play around. Once I've got these stitched down, I'm going to play around with the daffodils and show you what we're going to do to make daffodil heads for this piece. That's going to be different to last time because I'm not using my embellisher, just using my sewing machine in a more normal fashion. Okay, so here's my finished background. I've done really nice neat edges, or relatively neat edges. I'll show you the back. You can see all the stitching on the back there. It's pretty random. I've used the same colour green as the base thread for most of it, and it's got the odd little bit where there's been a bit of a glitch on the stitching, and that's okay. The edges have come out quite nicely. I actually tried to plan this one a little bit more than the last one, so I think that helped. Got some loose threads to cut off, and down here I've left these like this just for now, because if I cut these off straight across there now and then I'm faffing about with it some more, I think they might just fray a little bit. So I may leave them sticking out like that permanently. And the next thing I'm going to do is get some yellow heads onto here, but that won't be now till next week. I will show you very briefly. I've got a collection here of possibilities, and I'm not going to show you them all in detail because I think that could be a nice thing for next week. But we will enjoy doing that no end, because I think it's lovely when you get the contrast onto the background and you start to finish your piece off and pull it all together. And who can't be uncheered by daffodils? So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all again in here next week. I do hope so. Have a really good week. I hope the sun shines for you wherever you are. Bye for now.